Thank you, Shankar.
No problem. Perfect. There we go. Okay, sprint 31, sprint review. Just as a quick caveat before we get started, we are entering summer vacation time and all those things. There is several meetings still to be scheduled for more in-depth review on some of these features and those types of things. We'll do as we normally do in this session, where we give more at a high level and then going in depth on a few things. But for those of you wondering, there will be more in-depth things scheduled later as needed. Just scheduling conflicts during vacations and stuff can be quite difficult. Alys, I think we'll speak to that in a little bit. Okay, so sprint 31, I think I'm sharing. I am sharing. Some accomplished goals. For the design side, fairly status quo, just getting more and more concrete on design patterns, making sure we have sort of a very consistent design across all the portals, all the applications, everything like that, including how the system behaves when certain things happen, which we won't be necessarily going through those designs. You'll just kind of see them as they come up. On the development side, we have some unfunded study weeks to show you, part-time courses on PIR completion to show you. On the ministry side, a bunch of SIN validation stuff. We'll be going through the demo on that. Search student by SIN, view student application pending exceptions, send daily disbursement information. That's particularly our internal disbursement information about how much we basically sent to be paid. Won't go through the demo too much on that, but we will go through a little bit. And then the part-time courses on PIR completion as well, just basically the mirrored functionality. But 31 business context. Kaylin is off on vacation right now. We introduced her last sprint review, and then I'll pass it to you, Alys.
Thanks, Andrew. Welcome back from holidays. So just a reminder of a couple of things. We are super excited to show you some SIN validation stuff today, and we've been working with feature owners on that. So we've had a couple of different sessions. And just so you know how it works is when we have some new functionality that we're working on, we do sometimes a couple of what we call working sessions with the feature owner and Lynn and Andrew, and then the dev team takes it away and they do some designing and building, and then we often try to do a walkthrough before we get to show you the demo today. So that'll be exciting to share with you. As the feature owner knows, there's also been some work done on the Business BCeID solution. And I've talked to you a couple times about particularly the BCeID and the BC Services Card solution, where the dev team's taking all of the requirements that Anna helped gather and documented, and they're going to bring back some options. In the case of the BCeID, there aren't a bunch of options to come back for us to choose from. So they're working on the solution, which looks a heck of a lot like the current solution now. So that's going to be what we'll be working with, and we'll look forward to show that to you in a coming sprint, not today. We are going to show you a really quick overview of a new piece of functionality that came in through a change request. The first change request, it's around unfunded weeks. Just want to give you a heads up that unfunded weeks is kind of a new complex policy piece that we're bringing into play. And so we're going to show it to you today, but it's going to be about a 50,000 foot demonstration. So you're not going to come out of today with a really deep understanding of unfunded weeks, but we can certainly go over it at another time if you'd like to do that. But it's a good example of where we identified some misses in our MVP, and I'm sure we'll continue to identify some things that we absolutely have to have. And the process is that in order for it to be added to MVP, it goes through a change request process. And that change request is a written document. It's then evaluated by Chad and Marlo to determine if this is truly needed. And so today's kind of an exciting opportunity for us to show you the full loop on that. So a change was identified through the EPI team, 2 changes actually. First of all, that we were missing the capacity to manage unfunding weeks. And secondly, that the courses on a part-time application weren't showing up on the PIR, and that was necessary. And so we wrote that into our first change request. That was approved. And now we'll show you what that looks like now that it's been developed. We do have another change request that is also going through the approval process. Just so you know about it, it's in relation to field of study codes, federal field of study codes, and it's a required change as a result of some testing. We anticipate probably a couple more change requests coming through, but I'm working with the business right now, particularly about some pieces needed for reporting, operational reporting. So we're working through that, and then I'll write up the next change request. And then at a future date, we will show you the outcome of that. And if you ever want to see a change request, we keep them. Of course, we have a backup copy, but there is examples of them in the feature owner area on Teams. You're welcome to take a look at it. They also identify the acceptance criteria as well, if you're interested in that. And then we've got some other stuff that's bubbling. So folks will recall we went through the big spreadsheet, the MVP spreadsheet. We were able to narrow it down for you to say, hey, we're still working on about these 15, 16 items or so. And so now that's starting to get even smaller, but starting to work on the BC Services Card solution that the dev team will bring some options to the table. We're working through the credit check piece and whether or not that's needed. We've got the requirements for the PPD status coming out of this year's program year, so the dev team will work on that. Blaine's working on the T4A implementation, and of course the bulk functionalities, and I've already seen a bit of a sneak peek at some of the bulk uploading that starting to work on for bulk offerings, programs, COEs, those kinds of things. So that those are the items that that the dev team is starting to work on. Then of course we contribute to those conversations as well. So so lots of work still happening throughout the summer. Pass it back to you, Andrew.
Awesome. Sounds good. Let's dive into it here. I'm going to actually start with this guy, the show part-time courses on a PIR. So first thing I'm going to do is, I believe I just need to have, give me 1 sec, I changed my order. It was somewhat intentional. All right, 1 second. I'll actually do that one at the end. I changed my mind again. Okay, unfunded weeks. Let's start off with this one. Again, I'm not going to go through all the logic and all the math and everything on this one, just because it is quite complex. But effectively, what it means is when you're adding a study period, so when an institution is adding a study period offering as part of a program, what they do is when you select some dates, we're going to go August to November 1st. There's a bunch of read-only fields here. These fields are all calculated basically based off the data and the dates that are provided. So what you'll see is from August 1st to November 1st, that is 92 days. which equals 13.15, I believe, which rounds up to 14 weeks. So that's basically the entire reasoning behind this is to basically get this number here, which is the total weeks of funding we use in the assessment calculation. So from that, what happens is when breaks are added, there is validations that a break must be a minimum of 6 days. There is extra logic as well about when a break is calculated. If it's less than 21 days, it's a funded break. But then there's a 10% policy rule where we only fund up to 10%, and then those excess days are taken off of the total days. So as you'll notice here, this one had 92 days of funding. 9.8 of those days were unfunded, which equals this amount of funded days, which equals this amount of weeks. It's a bit of a loop sort of math here. Again, different explanations and tool tips and stuff will likely be needed. And in this as well as certain fields and stuff can be hidden and those types of things. If a break is, for example, over 21 days, you'll notice here that this is a 28-day break. 21 of it is valid, 7 is ineligible, and then which equals 92, and then the math kind of goes around again to effectively get this number. Everything is about this magic number here, the total funded weeks. That's the one we care about to use in the assessment. Depending on which validation errors show up, there is this and this. I do see questions in the chat there that it might be 5. I've like double check that right now, and I'm sure one of the devs is already taking a quick look at that already. So captured that. So in here, yeah, long story short, equals this. These numbers here are basically just effectively explanations about how we got to this number. Do we want that shown on the UI? Do we not? Maybe TBD, but that's basically how the math breakdown works. Once you've gone through it a few times, it starts making a lot of sense. But first time you see it, it's a lot of sort of step-by-step calculations that happen. But basically, that's the way to calculate the total funded weeks. This is one of those that there's likely to be at least 1 or 2 more in-depth conversations after this. Alys, I'll leave that to yourself, that if you need anything from us, just let us know on that.
Sounds good, thanks.
You can, let me just do this real quick. You can add in as well October 1st to October. You can do multiple breaks as well. And then it breaks off. So there's 21 and 7 and 10, and then the math breaks down again. Again, I'm not going to go through all the logic in here just because it is quite complex. I'm sure we all don't want to go through an Excel sheet of calculations to determine this, but there we have it. The next one I'm going to look at is some ministry sin stuff, and I saw Rebecca clapping, so I'm going to give myself a little high five for that. We're going to look at the ministry side. Here we are as a ministry user. I'm going to do something else first, but spoilers, it's on the screen. I know that this was a long anticipated thing, but something you'll see is when searching for a student now, there's a extra little field here in the middle called SIN. You can search via a SIN number for a student. Once you found a student, that SIN number does show up on their profile page right here, as well as there's another page with more details. Some things around this is you cannot do a wildcard search. So if you put SIN number as 2, doesn't work. If you put a whole bunch of numbers, still can't search, doesn't work. It has to be a SIN number, and it also has to be a valid SIN number. For those of you who don't know, 9 digits does not mean it's a SIN number. There is a basically little algorithm run to make sure that it's a valid SIN number. There's some math rules behind it. Through this, if you have the name, you can add in other search parameters as well. So you can put here, you can put Matt here and do different combinations as such. Obviously that's not gonna work, but if you put Joe, it's not gonna work now because Joe's SIN number is not this. So different wildcards, different parameters work. You can put in 2022 application for this SIN number, and Matt probably has one, obviously. 2021, he probably does as well, actually. But yeah, different combinations all work, but if you're using a SIN number, it has to be full and it has to be complete. That's the long and short of it for that.
And that's due to privacy or security reasons, right, Andrew? Like
Correct.
We didn't get to, yeah. Okay, thank you.
That's where, like, if we want to search for all students with a 900 SIN number, you can't do that.
Yeah, yep. So the business use for this is going to be, you will need to have the social insurance number of the individual. You'll type it in and it will return an individual.
Correct. Next piece here is a quite complex piece. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to look up Miss Leah here. Examples are a little better. This is definitely something that's going to have different roles and stuff attached to it, but this is going to be the full-blown thing as it is right now. Future enhancements to come. Something in this, we have switched it over to using ESDC for our SIN validation. This is a lot, so again, I will likely have to do further walkthroughs again afterwards, more in depth, because this does have a lot going on with it right now. But let's just go through it. So when a student goes in and they log in and create their account, they supply a SIN number. What the system does is basically, if that SIN number starts with a 9, we flag that as a temporary SIN number, and we're going to need the SIN number's expiry date to validate that against the study period dates. Because if you apply for a study period, but you have a temporary SIN number and it's expired, you're not valid. So what we did is, Leah, when she created her account, she entered a SIN number that started with a 9. Now, there's a few different avenues to sort of take to catch all these, but basically what happens is once Leah has created her account with a 9 SIN number, it goes off and gets validated. You'll see that in this, the SIN number was validated. The SIN was accepted, the first name was accepted, the last name was accepted, and the date of birth was not. Again, don't worry about the data part too much about how it got there. We've had to sort of fake some of this data in terms of loading it, just because we haven't been able to do the full end-to-end integration testing for this piece yet. But what happens is once she has this, she has to have an expiry date. She can still go through and fill out an application, but what will happen is if she fills out an application and that application date is not within the study period date, we add a restriction to their account. The same thing happens with a PIR. So if you go through and create an application, pick your dates, and then go through. If the dates don't line up with your expiry date, get a restriction. If you go through a PIR and complete the application as well, what will happen is, because when a student selects their dates on the application, that's not necessarily the correct dates, because the student's just picking them. Once the PIR, the program information request, is completed, that's when the actual final dates are concrete for the student and will also validate at that time. Again, I do apologize. I'm not going to go through every one of these steps because we'd be here for a day. But that's the two avenues of which we catch them. So the next thing that Leah did, we got her expiry date added. Great. She completed an application. It passed. Great. Everything's fine. Then Leah got a permanent SIN number. So as you see, starts with a 7. So what happened is Leah contacted or went through that process because their SIN numbers expired and supplied their actual correct SIN. What happens is through here, you can, I'm just going to grab this number, add a new SIN number for the student. At this time, you're required to add a note, and you can select this skip the validations step. This basically means don't check with ESDC if this SIN number belongs to the student. It is correct. That was something raised by the business area that we need to be able to do that, because certain times that it takes them a while to get their SIN number updated. We need to get their funding to the feds. Again, I'm not going to go through all the avenues for that, but that's what that does. So if standard process would be add new SIN or permanent SIN number, add new SIN. Great. This SIN number is now going to wait until the next job goes through, and it's going to go get validated with ESDC and provide a result similar to these. Did it match? Did it not? And that's what that'll do. If you add a SIN number with this checked, it is valid. It is validated. At this point, the student's SIN number is validated and they are able to do whatever they want. They can go create an application, get money, and all those things. Basically, everything to do with their SIN number has been bypassed, and this is the student's SIN number. Through this, let me also just show what happens if you add a temporary SIN. Again, my note-taking practices are not the best, but that's okay. So you'll see what happened is when you added a new SIN number that started with a 9, the system flagged that SIN number as a temporary SIN. What this now means is that there's an expiry date that has to be added. If it's not added, what will happen is when the student creates an application, that validation between the student submitting their application with a specific date range, it will fail because there's no date to validate it against because there's no expiry date. At this point, the student will get instructions, which I'll show you in a second here, relating to like their account activity page where they can then see sort of instructions of what to do. However, as well within the application, how there's a specific exception for protected persons and residents, I believe, that if you select that answer, you have to get an exception, in which case you'll upload the documentation as well. So there's a few avenues of which you'll get caught there. Again, you'll see why I'm not going through every one of these views because it will be very confusing and there'll be a lot. But let's just say Leah submitted an application. She went through, submitted an application. What's going to happen is there is going to be, can I add this manually? So Leah went through and submit. Oh, I'm not Leah right now. 1 second. Sorry, wrong person. So now I'm logging in as Leah. Trying to. So student will see this banner up here. Not going to go through this entire feature. That was reviewed, I think, 2 sprints ago. But through this, the student will see that they have this restriction on their account. And through this, you can see that there's some instructions here that the student can do. This entire page has already been flagged for content review, so don't worry about the words too much. That was just some placeholder text that we added. But this is where, depending on the student and their circumstances, they can use the generic file uploader to upload the files and do whatever they need to do to basically, the long and short of this is their entire need is to get us to put a SIN number expiry date in here for the student. So say their SIN number expired in 2024 on July 5th, added expiry. Expiry date has been added. Again, this is where either it will have to be validated with the SDC or bypassed. So right now, this SIN number is still not valid until that there is a yes there and it's complete, but there's an expiry there. Again, if we wanted to skip the validations and add it, we could do that as well. And then through this, remove the restriction, everything's great. Student submits an application. The expiry validations will pass because their expiry date is after their application dates, and they're not going to have any issues. So that's effectively the temp ones. Again, sorry, I know I'm talking quite quickly. Alys, any major areas that I should revisit for that?
Now, I just want to clarify then. So students will be adding their SIN when they create their account, and it will go for validation. Ministry users will be able to see in this area by searching for the student and then going to the SIN tab, what's happening with that SIN validation, why, for example, it failed. If they are authorized to do so, then they could push it for manual resend after adding an expiry date, or they could bypass it. So I think we've covered off all of the requirements, and I'm guessing that folks want to kind of get in there and take a look at it a little bit. So we'll get this into the test environment, and the teams that do this work can go in and take a look and run through a few scenarios to make sure that you're feeling comfortable with it. But I think that's good. Thank you.
What I just did there on the screen is I clicked add new SIN, skip validations, and added an expiry date. So this SIN number is, for the sake of terms, complete, and it's good to go for the student. This one would not be. I do see a hand up there.
Jeremy wanted to make a comment, maybe super quick. Jeremy, normally we say comments, but go for it.
Sorry, yeah, I just wanted to clarify, and just for the student support team folks who are watching this, that when they submit their account and then the SIN check happens, that creates their account. They don't get prevented from creating an account while the SIN check is happening. So the SIN check is happening in the background, and as soon as they hit submit to create the account, that their account is created so that they do have access to go in and, for example, upload supporting documentation if they need to.
Thanks for clarifying that, Jeremy. Good point.
Perfect. So I got these two here. I'm actually flying through this. View student application pending exceptions. It's a quite wordy one, but it's a very simple piece. It's sort of step one in terms of the direction. I know that there's a couple sort of high priority asks and stuff that came out of this, which have been flagged. But through this, if you recall last sprint, just checking. Perfect. Yes. Yeah. Last sprint, we demoed the exceptions piece. So when a student submits their application with effectively one of the questions answered where they ask for an exception, I think I have a student here. I can probably find one. For example, this question. Oh, look at that. Now you've answered it that way. Perfect example. When the student clicks like this, and there is this box popped up here, the student is flagged for an exception. Now I'm going to go back. So students flagged for an exception, but the only real way to get to that exception before would be to go and look at Matt, look at his applications, find his current one, look at the assessments thing, and you'll see that there's a student exception here. In this case, this one was declined. Again, forgive any data issues and those types of things, but basically there's a student exceptions here and it's declined, but that's not really practical. So something we flagged right from the beginning was basically a rolled up view about what's pending. So as a ministry person, there's this student requests area. And in this case, this is the exceptions one that basically has all of the exceptions that are waiting or in pending state that need to be actioned. So when a student, for example, calls or does something like that about being that, hey, I'm waiting for an exception, what's the status with it? It should be in this list. Unless that there's an issue or something like that, it should be in this list. Through this, there has been things flagged again, as I said, but through this, you can do your normal search piece here about searching for your application number. You can search by name. Standard things, but basically this is the view. When you hit view here, you're navigated to the assessment screen that I navigated to the first time. So in this case, this would be a ministry person. You go find Matt, find that application, go to the assessment screen, and this is where you see the breakdown of exactly what's happening with this application. The other view is basically just a shortcut of, hey, I want to know everyone that's pending. Get me there quick. That's what that is. Again, we'll go through what the exception process is, as we did that last week. But that's what that one is there. I don't think I missed anything for that one. This will be a similar thing as well for other sort of pending things that are waiting, sort of like how the institutions work with like program information requests, those types of things. But basically the things to action. Just while I'm here, I'll just say a couple quick things about some UI stuff. As you guys will notice that some of the UI is looking quite a bit different. We have been upgrading and getting closer to a more concrete UI, as you know. So you'll notice here that the search boxes are different. They behave differently. Things just generally look a bit different. It has caused some UI bugs and those types of things, as expected right now. It's just sort of something we're doing as we're going. But that's why I notice like the search boxes and things work differently. Just the general views, the fonts and stuff are looking different. Again, UI bugs though are expected right now. Daily disbursement information. Let me just see if I can pull this up super quick. This might be one to demo after on the side. Let me just talk through this one super quick. So daily disbursement information. What that basically means is when we send a eCert or disbursement file to the feds, they send us back a receipt file or a daily disbursement file about basically the money that was sent back. At that same time as they send back a, they'll call it a notification to the finance folks to basically say, hey, this is what we paid. This is effectively a report from our system saying the receipt file that we got back, we processed it, and this was the number, and all the numbers have to match. Sorry, just got sidetracked. I just saw it out of the corner of my eye. The reason why you didn't see that restriction is because I was filtered on a category. So it wasn't in the category that I was picking. That restriction, if it's in the list, it should be there. It's just probably under the finance or appeals or something, one of the other categories. Okay, so daily disbursement information. So that's what that is. That's a report that basically gets verified against the second set of numbers to go through. I'm not going to be able to show that super quick right now. Again, some of these have already been flagged about a further demo or a walkthrough or a more in-depth thing down the road as well. And I'll just put that one on my list to do. Show part-time courses on PIR completion. Let's just see if there is a application which I can show that. Fairly simple piece. Just give me one sec. Here, I'm just going to move this over here. Just going to click around a bunch for a second, just so I don't get nauseous. So who do we got here? Mr. Felix. So I am going to just log in as Mr. Felix. Mr. Felix, where are So this is an application that a student submitted where they had said, my programs are not listed. Sorry, my program's not listed. Analytics computers, this was the date, and some course information was needed to be provided. Basically what this is effectively a student just completing more information about their part-time courses. So when an institution is completing their program information request, it's easier, effectively. Easy for them to narrow down what they're taking, who they are, et cetera, to basically answer what are they actually taking and how much are they paying. Basically, the whole reason for this is for them to basically assign them a program and assign them an offering. So for example, this student was in this program, and here was their course names and course dates from what they were taking here. So again, I'm not going to go through the matching game, but as you'll see, Computer 101, course code, start date, and end dates are here. The students completed 2 of them. So as you'll see here, course name, course code, course start date, course end date, and they did it twice. I think it was Guru that was very nice to me and put stuff in order. So 101, 202, 101, 202 with the dates. So that's what that is. And again, the whole reason for this is for them to basically pick the program and pick the offering that helps that student out. That one was part of the first change request there. That is now in there. So unfunded weeks, got that. Show part-time courses on PIR, got that. Some SIN validation management stuff, got that. Search student via SIN. Student application pending exceptions, got that. And the daily disperse information again. We'll probably schedule a side demo or something for that because it is sort of quite complex and it's definitely not the easiest to look through, especially if you don't know what we're doing. So I'll look at doing something separate for that. But that's effectively what that is. On that as well, just on the UI front, unless Lynn, if you feel like saying anything. No, okay, all good. Yeah. Basically just continuing the UI updates, some system patterns as well as those things. So as you'll notice, like on the development side, we're catching up slowly, but at least having some distance between the developer side and the UX front allows them to get more concrete on the design patterns, the way things work, even down to simple things like date formats and those types of things, making sure we're consistent across the board and making sure we have as concrete as the UI as possible so things don't look different, really. That's one of the biggest things there. It is 10:40, so I'm going to jump into our next sprint goals here. Again, this is not sprint planning, very subject to change. We have a bunch of technical stuff that we're going to be handling. We have a typo around upgrade. Again, those of you who don't know can kind of ignore these next 4. Reorganizing some API work, adding some system user auditing, and changing some date formats as well, not necessarily in the UI, but date formats kind of go everywhere. On the development side, ministries approving offerings and institutions requesting to edit an offering would be the other piece of that. And then another reassessment request sort of view, which would be that another similar summary view about sort of the ones that are waiting. And then again, on the design front, continuing as we have been, sort of expanding on what we talked about the last couple of sprint reviews. Standard feedback, I know we're about to jump into that now. As usual, if you don't have access, you can put it in the chat. The email is always open as well. And with that, I think I'll pass it over to you, Alys.
Sounds good. Thanks, Andrew. So just in the chat, thanks to Becky for adding the feedback tracking there. So just a reminder, if you've asked a question, and we have gone through and answered all of them and tried to organize all of those questions. So the question is in yellow and the answer is in blue. Welcome to take a peek on there. And sometimes if we run out of time, we'll move the questions from here over to there as well. And we go through that every week. So just to start with, it looks like there was some questions talking about the unfunded weeks. We could probably do an entire session about this, but yes, the business has identified that more than 5 days is considered a break. Less than 5 days, 5 days or less, is not considered a break and therefore does not need to be reported. And so Andrew showed the functionality there about how that's monitored and tracked in there so that institutions don't waste their time adding 2-day breaks. So that's there. Then we had a question about wild cards. And so just to clarify, what Andrew showed was that we, being ministry users, cannot do a search for SIN using a wild card. And for folks, a wild card is just the asterisk. That's all it is. So you can't search to, yeah, thank you. Show me all that. It won't allow you to do that with SIN. And the reason for that is a privacy and security issue, because of course, then we would get a big list of people with SIN numbers, and that would defeat the privacy and security. So we can't do that. However, you can do that with the names. So if, for example, you want to search for anybody with an M, can you use the wild card on there? Whoever's driving, I think it's probably Andrew. So you don't even need to be honest, but yeah, you can search for names. It's just the SIN that is limited that way. Then there was some questions about, of course, in a test environment, and when we're playing with this functionality, we don't always have valid SINs, because what is a valid SIN? There's this logarithmic thing. I don't even know how it works, but there are some SINs. So the good news is that we can get some valid SINs so that you don't have to try a bunch and see if it works and see if it works. We can get you some valid, logarithmically valid SINs for the test environment. So if you need that, just let us know, or we can reuse some of the SINs that we have there as well. And then Kina was asking about the restrictions. So I did look that up. And so just a reminder about restrictions. Thanks. There's different categories of restrictions. And in categories, there's sub reasons. So when you go to the BCSL delinquency, okay, slow. Whoever's driving, slow.
Sorry.
That's okay. Let's go back. So when you select BCSL delinquency, you'll notice what the types are there, and there's the B3D one. And so this is a specific type of restriction where only the BC portion of the loan is in default. And so it is there, and that can be added manually, but we also have a process whereby it's added automatically. We talked about some of those as well.
Okay, sorry for interruption. Just one more question about the B2D. I just see the B2D, the description say not eligible for BC funding, but eligible for CSL. Actually, B2D eligible for BC funding. When the loan in delinquency, not in default, is still eligible for BC funding.
Okay.
For B2D, yeah.
Yeah, and so what you're describing is that sounds like some of the wording is off and needs to be adjusted, and that's not a problem. We know we need to do a full content review of all of the wording, what we call content, all the way through the system, and particularly that restrictions area we'll want to spend a bunch of time on. The content expert I've been saying is coming in the summer. Don't know what that looks like. So I'm going to suggest to you that it's coming later on, probably maybe late summer at the earliest. And we'll go through each one of the screens, each one of those areas to make sure that we've accurately stated what's there. So we'll definitely do that with the restrictions. So we make sure that we remove any of those errors.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Oh, there we go. So Harry also threw in easily available. There you go. That's really super helpful. Thank you. So it sounds like we can get fake name generator, fake different things. So different ways to get access to what could be deemed a valid SIN number to be used. Those, I think, are all the questions that we had today, but just want to highlight a couple of really cool things today. One, you saw the feedback loop, right? We identified with the EPI team as we were going through everything, there was a couple of gaps, and there's going to be more as we continue to move forward. And so really good example of where we identified a gap. We identified the change request. It went through a process of approval, and it's now built into the system. So you can see that at work. Obviously, we want to keep change requests to an absolute bare minimum because we want to get all of that MVP finished. But we know there's going to be some. There's already a couple other ones starting to percolate. So if it is absolutely required for the business, then we need to make a change request and get that in there. And you can feel confident that it'll move through that process. And if it's approved, get in there. Also, just another example too, where you identified searching by SIN. That was a significant problem. There was a lot of anxiety about it, and you can see how, okay, we fixed it. And we fixed it. Now you can see it, and it's in there. So thank you so much to the dev team for hearing that and fixing that. That's agile at work, right? Iterative. So that's awesome. We've also got that whole solution for SINs, which addressed a couple of other outstanding issues that was on the MVP with specifically Jeremy, you and I had talked about, hey, there's some things missing here. We need to be able to add an expiry date. We need to be able to override, I think is the language we currently use. Override a SIN. So we've now got that functionality there. We'll need to sort out, of course, who has access to that from a profile perspective. Can everybody do that? And should they? And you'll also note that there's also a note required every time. So we need to account for our decisions. So lots of really good stuff there. So, and then going forward, there's still lots of, the HEC team needs to take some breaks. So hopefully folks have got some holidays planned. And then there's some other work that we have, but we are getting much, much closer to where we need to be, which is great. And really looking forward to sharing that BCeID alternative solution with folks as we get a little closer there. Andrew, anybody else? Any other questions or comments?
I don't think so. I don't see anything. I think the standard response is to give 13 seconds.
Yeah. Oh, and we gave 13 seconds. SIN question. When a student creates an account in the new system, will the SIN info be checked against SFAS? That's a good question.
Yeah.
I don't.
Maybe some context. I couldn't really think how to type that out without putting a whole essay in. What I mean is, we have an individual who 15 or 20 years ago created an account with us in SFAS but never did anything. So that SIN record is sitting in SFAS, and then they submit a new. Then it happens all the time. They forget, and then they go to create a new account using the new system. Will it go back and check that, or how would that work? Like, is it going to show, sorry, there's already an account under this name? And then thinking about how that would be managed, would we have the ability to go back into SFAS to verify that, or would they link those up? So if there already is account information in SFAS, when you enter it into the new system, will it kind of transfer that data and move that into the new system?
So there's some review again based off of the transition plan and what that's exactly going to look like. As it is right now, there isn't a sort of direct requirement to be doing that, especially like consistently, or what necessarily that would look like. But as Harry just said there in the chat, though, is we do have a mechanism for sharing data, and one of them is SIN. But through that, then depending on what that looks like, we have to figure out how that would work best, and then ideally keeping those interactions as little as possible is the most ideal. Because it is only temporary. But again, I think TBD on that, but definitely keep note of that.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think when Kaylin's back, we'll be able to have some more conversation and work with TBTB on more of that, what I would call part of that transition plan. What's it going to do? How's that going to work, especially as we bridge that gap of old and new? More conversations for sure. So just some more helpful info from Harry there about the SIN generator. So if you're looking to move into the test environment and want to make sure you're using a valid SIN, there's some information here.
Awesome. And with that, that is our 13 seconds. I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their Wednesday and see you all in 3 weeks.
Thank you.